Michael, hey, congratulations for your new film, Confidential Informant.
Thank you.
So we have to ask is where the original idea came from for this movie.
Okay, so Mike Kachek is a former undercover narcotics detective in the new NYPD. He wouldn't like me to say LAPD. I think he was spent 20 years or so as a detective in the New York Police Department. And I think the majority of that was as an undercover narcotics detective. That was his specialty. He did it during the period of the crack epidemic during the late 80s and 90s, which was a particularly volatile time to be doing that kind of job in New York. It was very dangerous. And Mike is a very literate kind of guy. You know, he reads a lot, and he's a cinephile. He's very well versed in the cinema. He's definitely not just stereotypical cop. And he kept copious notes during this period, and he's written a number of screenplays and plays and stuff. He writes all the time. And I don't know, about 8-9 years ago, a mutual friend of ours brought this extremely long script. I mean, it was almost a novel, I'd say, rather. It was like a novel with dialogue. It was supposed to be 180 pages. It was really thick. But I loved it. I read it and I went, wow, if I could get this down to like 87 pages, 90 pages, I'd have a kick-ass action drama screenplay here. And we spoke a lot, and I made an agreement with him, and eventually came out to LA, and we met in LA. And I just had this feeling that I could get this movie made. It was one, you get a lot of projects and you go after them, but there's few that you just feel with certainty that they're going to be a movie, right? That they're going to actually end up on the screen, because it's such a convoluted process to get a film made. And it's so weird when you read reviewers talking about a film, because a film, as if like that concept of the director, the auteur, is actually really has any relevance today. There's just so many people involved in making a film, and so many different facets, and it's just such a complex corporate procedure to get it made. You just need so many people and financiers, and everybody has their say. So it's rare when you get an instinctive feeling that something is actually going to make it all the way through that process, all the way through the years of what it takes to get this picture made. But I had that feeling straight away with this one. I knew, I stuck with it. We had studios that were interested in it. It took me about 2 years or so, whatever, to get it down to what I thought was a commodifiable length, something that I could actually take out there and not be laughed at and thought I was a lunatic. Oh, you were bringing out you're bringing us a Dostoevsky's War and Peace. We're never going to make that, right? It's all a game that you have to play. It's like The Art of War, by Sun Tzu. That book, right? You really have to. I mean, I think that's probably the most widely read book among high-level agency executives in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. Anyway, so I always had that feeling about this script, that it was going to get made. And at one point, Voltage was going to do it. They made offers to Nicolas Cage. He was interested in it. And John Travolta, they made offer. He wanted to do it. There were some really good actors who really gravitated towards this thing. And for some reason, the financing never came together at that period with those guys, right? and then David Zelon at Mandalay wanted to make it. And each time when you come to another studio that wants to do it, right, the script changes, the title changes, all these things happen because it's a corporate, it's an organic process, and you have to be as the shepherd of the process, which is, I guess, what the producer director is. You've got to be able to permutate organically with the various variations that are going to occur, you know, with different input. So the script grows and changes, and every time it comes back to Detective Kachek, he's like going, "Oh my God!" It's like it's the characters' names have changed. This has happened. That, you know, it's like all these, you know, and he would always kind of like go through it and like say, "But this, logically, this doesn't make sense," and all this, you know. And he'd really try and steer it back to its kind of authentic cop self, right? Which he really knew. And in the process of working with him, I went to New York, stayed in Brooklyn, met the cops that he'd worked with for all those decades, really understood the brotherhood thing of cops, how they felt that they were brothers. And I really could understand that. I mean, you have to actually spend time amongst those guys to really understand where their heads are at, you know, what they go through, and that it is like a war, and that war metaphor is entrenched in their behavior, because from their perspective, they're fighting a war. Their lives are on the line, you know. So eventually the script came through my representatives, Dave Fleming at Atlas Entertainment. Atlas is really it's a management company. It manages like select directors and actors, but it's also a really powerful production company. They just did Oppenheimer, that's out right now. They did Chuck Roven's company. They did The Dark Knight. You know, they do David O. Russell's movies. It's a serious place. And Dave decided to become involved as a producer, and he got the script to Mel Gibson. And it was just a perfect storm. There was Bonded Media Capital wanted to finance a Mel Gibson movie, and they had relationships that they could bring into play, and Lionsgate came aboard, and suddenly we were making the movie after years of going through ups and downs of, you know, like the kind of roller coaster ride of getting it there. It happened.
So in the end here, were you satisfied with the changes with all the script?
Well, you know, satisfaction is a hard adjective to apply in show business. I mean, you know, you've got to really start with the Rolling Stones and Mick Jagger, and what does he say? "I can't get no satisfaction." Remember that song?
Yeah, I do.
You know, it depends what kind of satisfaction you're going after. You know, for me, the satisfaction is getting the movie made and getting it in a wide release in theaters all across the United States. I mean, that's really hard to do for an independent movie, right? And to do that, you've got to make compromises. It's politics, you know. This is not like, you know, I don't care if you're Gaspar Noé or Michael Oblowitz. Everybody's going to make compromises, and nobody's going to be happy at the end, you know. And then you've got to let this multi-created project has to go out to the mercy of the ravages of reviewers, right, who have their own motivations. And, you know, we live in this kind of post-Trumpian, post-Fox News, post-Tucker Carlson media savagery, where everybody's getting off on being abusive and, you know, just putting everybody down. And that's how they get clicks on their on their platforms, right? And they don't get it by saying, "Oh, this is just a gentle, humanistic portrayal of love between men at their finest." You know, they get off by saying, "This this idiot, Michael Oblowitz, who obviously can't, you know, open a paper bag properly, definitely shouldn't be allowed to, you know, move a camera on a dolly. He probably doesn't even know what a dolly is, right? Well, Michael Oblowitz had a few movies in Cannes back in the day, and he was one of the biggest music video directors in the world. But I guess he's addicted to heroin or something now, because what the hell happened here, you know? And then they just go off, you know, into some kind of rant and rave. Um, you know, it's like, is this movie out there, the edit that I envisioned, that I made? No. It's like, that never is, you know. It's like, did I have final cut? Yeah, I was, you know, I'm in the DGA. I was producer. You got final cut until the movie's delivered to the studio, to Lionsgate. And then once they paid whatever it is, the $10 million to the bank to get everybody off the hook, well, guess what? They just inherited final cut, because you have to assign all the rights. And as a very wise lawyer once said to me, yeah, you can have your cut. You can have the movie exactly the way you want it. You can have your absolute artistic vision of this picture. Who's going to pay the bank back the $10 million, though? Because if you don't assign those rights to your distributor, to the studio, you're on the hook for $10 million. So I guess if you're Steven Spielberg or, you know, Christopher Nolan, or someone who can say to the studio, listen, I've got $50 million, you know? You don't do what I want to do, I'm going to buy it back for you and release it my way. I guess you can play that game. I'm not in that position to do that, you know? So it's a leverage game. Again, it's back to the art of war. It's how do you strategize, and what are your goals, and how do you create the successful deployment of those goals and not alienate an entire industry so you can never get to make another movie and live again, you know? So you got to win some and lose some here. It's measure for measure, as Shakespeare would say.
Well, then tell us about your approach on directing this film, because I was getting a sense of sort of the old detective noir type of films.
Yeah. Well, you know, so, all right. So I obviously come into every project with a sense of elation, A, that it's getting made, and B, that I'm going to actually be able to realize my vision, right? So I put in as much of my vision as I can, right, which is 100%. And I'm going to drive everybody crazy on the shoot, because that's where you get control, where you put an indelible stamp on this thing, right? Is the performances, the way it's shot, the lighting, the words that come out of the actors' mouths, and like you said, the inspiration, the influences, who you're feeling. I mean, I was feeling Seijun Suzuki, the 1950s and 60s Japanese noir master. That's what I was feeling, right? And I'm always feeling Sam Fuller, you know, and Abram Polonsky. Like, I'm a huge noirist fan. So whether my noir influences are of the moment or not, I don't know. I thought the film did a very successful depiction of a postmodernist kind of noir universe, right? I think the deployment of voiceover and the kind of subjectivity of the characters really worked, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Seems to me it was above the heads of most of the guys who were reviewing it. But hey, you know, I don't know what they watch these days. I mean, they're sitting there glued to video games or whatever. I don't know. You know, it seems to me there's a functionally illiterate universe of critics, right? When I'm missing Roger Ebert really badly, you know? You know, so, but I mean, for me, I was feeling Yakuza gangster movies from Japan, as I was feeling Ozu. Those are the kind of filmmakers that I was feeling, and they're kind of fractured, discombobulated psychic universe, with things, you know, everything was upside down, right? In that world. And they were just grasping for survival straws. So that's kind of what I was trying to deploy, that kind of a world with lurid colors and and desperate characters leading desperate lives. And I think it's all there,
Yeah,
I'd like to write the review.
review your own product.
Well, at least maybe if I know, you obviously you don't want to explain your own work. Like if your work needs explaining, then what the fuck is it doing, But I mean the I just wanted this high intensity world. I mean, I was there in New York in the 90s, I saw that coked out craziness that was going on, in the pre-fentanyl cocaine era, where people weren't scared if they snorted up a whole bag of coke that they were going to die on the spot, right? There was this kind of madness in the world of that city, and that's what those cops were about. And anything could go wrong, at any moment. It was just like hurtling down the highway of hell.
So with this type of film, you are balancing different type of storylines, comparing, from the persistent investigation to the crimes on the street. How did you want to handle all these stories together?
Well, I mean, I guess that gets back to Suzuki and Ozu and Kurosawa and that Japanese style of storytelling, like Rashomon, right? I mean, it's another great film that I love so much. Is you have these different characters, points of view, right? I'm always fascinated by Rashomon. Like, I mean, I think I think it was George Lucas who said it was the greatest movie ever made. It was like, his influence for Star Wars, like everything goes back to Kurosawa. He's kind of like, to me, the Shakespeare of cinema. And I feel like I was telling these stories from different points of view. I was showing the informant's point of view, the great actor Eric Valdez, who plays Senor, the informant, right? We see his point of view, which is the junkie point of view, and it's and the irony of being a junkie. It's not like some Keith Richards style junkie kind of guy, living in this debauched world of heroin and cocaine. He's a guy who's just got plugged into this addiction, and it's out of control, and he's never been able to control it, but he still try to maintain in the context a normal relationship with his wife and child. He's like try to send them money, and he's try to, well, what is he like? He says, I never wanted to be with her once I shot up heroin because I didn't want to give her AIDS. And like there's a kind of morality that happens in his desperation. So the guy who's actually living the most debilitating, seemingly amoral existence is really the moral core of the movie. That's why I called him Senor. Senor is the Latino Catholic name for God, right? It's in many Mexican and Puerto Rican and Latino mythology, religious mythology. You call Senor God. There's a great Bob Dylan song, Senor, right? You tell me which way we're heading, Lincoln County or Armageddon. That's the lines from the Dylan song, right? And that kind of inspired a lot of this film for me. So we did, this junkie was just trying to survive, and then it was at the end of the road, right? So he was, he felt like he was, preyed upon by drug dealers, and that's how he became a junkie, and that was his moral core. The cops have a different moral core, right? They were brothers in war. They were brothers from a different mother, right? So their story tells the world from a different Rashomon-esque perspective, right? They're in the same world as junkie, but they see it from a different point of view. And they, so from their perspective, again, desperation sets in. There's Tom Moran, played by the brilliant Nick Stahl. And Tom is just trying to, live with his wife and child. And Tom Moran he's played by Dominic Purcell. Sorry, Mike Thornton's played by Nick Stahl. And Dominic is trying to just live a quiet life with his wife and child in idyllic, bucolic, upstate New York, drive in every day into the city. And of course, fate deals him a card too. He's now got a terminal disease. What does he do? How does he survive on the meager insurance that his job pays out for his wife and kid? And then you've got Mike Thornton, played by the brilliant Nick Stahl. And Thornton's just a man who's been beaten down by, here he is, he's the upholder of morals in our society. He's the cop. He's the guy busting junkies. He's the avenging angel, arresting everybody. But he's like at the moral, turpitude of the universe. He's like the guy who's having sex with hookers and getting drunk and the drug taking around him. And he's lost his moral center. He's just a walking victim of post-traumatic trauma from war and from being a cop for so long, and his whole universe is dissented, right? So they're these characters that have these moral contradictions in the way that they're seeing the world, right? And the movie is about their redemption, how they find their redemption, how the Nick Stahl character finds his way to sobriety and gets through all this, and how Tom Moran sacrifices his life, the Dom Purcell character, for his wife and family. And so does the junkie, Senor, does the same thing. So there's this moral equivalence between these guys from the two opposite ends of the social and moral, more importantly, spectrum, doing the same thing in this crazy Suzuki-style shootout with drugs flying, and it's just this kind of, the junkie senor is covered in cocaine all over his face. My sense of humor, but it's also this kind of sense of the unraveling of this world as he tries to make the right moral choice. Well, so, these are the themes that are going through my head when I'm making this. And I'm reading these reviews and I'm going, how the fuck can't these guys see what I'm doing? What are they, functionally illiterate? They're looking for, the one guy compared it, well, you should rather go see John Wick. Dude, John Wick is fucking idiocy, man. This film is about 1,000 times more profound than John Wick. Plus, John Wick is made on, you were talking about the Lost John Wick, right? It was made on about $250 million, and this movie's made on $7 million. What do you know about filmmaking? I'm reading these things, I'm going, my God, who are these people? Which video game controller did they roll out from underneath? The one that was controlling the Titan submersible, probably.
Well, even with the indie budget with yourself, you pulled off quite an accomplished action sequences through your film.
Oh yeah, but I've been doing it for a long time, and it's like, I like your approach. You're really seeing the movie, right? Which is it's a pretty damn good movie for given what I have to, given the parameters of what we have to do and how we got to do it. These movies are integral to themselves. I don't look at John Wick and think about comparing it to Raiders of the Lost Ark or Indiana Jones. I don't look at I don't look at any movie and think about who am I comparing it to. I'm looking at the movie for the universe that it creates, and what is that universe, and why is it interesting to me? And yeah, so I like doing indie movies. I don't, for me, there's a kind of equilibrium you find where every movie you're giving your parameters, and how do you devise a scene that's going to work within those parameters, right? So that's how I look at what the limits are to the action sequence, and then how can I make it really powerful within that. I don't need to have a motorbike driving through you're right, let's use the John Wick metaphor, right? Or the Fast and Furious. Okay, we're gonna have a motorbike scene. We're gonna have 500 extras running and scattering. We're gonna have, baskets of fruit flying up in the air in slow motion, and trucks racing through intersections and rolling over and crashing and bursting into flame. And there's like it's some random cop is firing into the air and hits a helicopter and lands on a building, and the building bursts into an explosion, and people are forced to jump out the top floors of a skyscraper, kind of like 9/11, and it just rolls on and on and on and on. Yeah, sure, that's one type of movie, right, where you've got unlimited money. I got to think, how do real action sequences go down? What happens to the real cops? Dude, it happens in an instant, right? I lived both in New York City and in Venice Beach during their most violent gang-infested years. I lived on the Lower East Side of New York, dude, on the Bowery, where you woke up in the morning and there were dead corpses lying on you in the middle of winter on your doorstep. The New York City that I lived in the late 70s and 80s was not the New York you're in now. And the Venice Beach that I lived in the 90s and early 2000s, dude, I've seen a lot of shootouts. I've seen drive-bys. I've seen people blown away, right? And it happens in an instant. It's just bang, bang, and everybody's dead. So I bring that kind of immediacy into these very constructed action sequences. And yes, of course, it's a choreography of death and violence, and it's to me, I'm always thinking of the great Chinese action directors, early John Woo, where they had limited resources.
Yeah.
And they created, I always like the way they use slow motion or Sam Peckinpah. I loved Sam Peckinpah's, The Wild Bunch and movies like that. So to me, I can create the immediacy of violence through slow motion and create a kind of ballet of blood, like in that opening sequence when the cops bust through the door and that big thing of cocaine goes spiraling around. I do all my effects are practical effects. Those aren't done digitally. I'm old school. I grew up shooting Panavision and 35 millimeter Arriflexes. That's my world. So I know what the camera could do, because all that a digital camera is doing is emulating a film camera. So I want to create my effects as live action as possible. And so by doing that, I minimize what it's going to cost, because all those effects in John Wick 2, whatever that idiot reviewer was trying to compare my film to and what should be seen instead of my film. Yeah, all that shit's done in digital post-production, because they've got a $50 million post-production budget to sit and tweak things and do whatever they want and have bullets flying through 3D worlds and whatever Matrix type universes. But I'm interested in what that camera can actually do in real time, and how the camera changes your perception of reality, because that's at the core of what cinema is. Cinema is a camera that can change your perspective of reality. Now, D.W. Griffiths, via Jean-Luc Godard, said, cinema is a girl and a gun. And that's all you really need, that famous quote. And that's true. And we have that in that opening sequence. You have that straight reference. I have those two super hot girls, that one beautiful tattooed girl, her name's Flocka. And the other girl, the one who's screaming, the two gorgeous girls, and they're naked and smoking crack, and in comes the guys with the guns, and there you've got your metaphor for what cinema is supposed to be. All you need is a girl and a gun. And then but I think all you need is a girl and a gun and a camera that can run in slow motion. And then that's what I do. So I work in that limited universe, but always trying to reference great cinema, great masters of cinema. The history is where it's at, You don't know your history. How do you live in the present and the future? You need something to guide you.
Well, you certainly accomplished that, because the film is great storytelling and very realistic. But I only have a little bit of time left. Michael,
you're gonna write a review, right? You write a physical review. I need some, because you really seem to understand the film. I need you to write a review and say, because I'm looking at reviewers who can really understand this, what my practice is and what I'm doing, and understand how when you make a movie in these, it's not just, it's another payday phoned in for Mel Gibson. You know what I mean? Mel Gibson worked his ass off to pull this fucking thing together, right? It's like we had, he's expensive, so 50% of the budget goes to Mel Gibson, and then, then we're shooting it just at with COVID, and half the cast gets COVID in the middle of the shoot. So now what do we have to do? I have to shoot half the scene with Mel, and then I've got to figure out with the producer how to get a tax credit. We got to move to another country now, because now we can't shoot the other half of the scene. We got to rebuild those sets in another country, and we got to shoot it when the actors have recuperated. I mean, to make a movie these days on a low budget is really not easy, especially an action movie, and to tell a story that still glues together. So now that you've spoken, if you want to write a review, I would really be into that and see what you have to say, because you seem like you really get it.
Well, I've watched a lot of movies, so I completely understand you.
I really appreciate your perspective. It's quite wonderful, really, and refreshing. Maybe you should be writing for the LA Times, because the guy who's writing for the LA Times sure as fuck doesn't know what he's writing about. I can tell you that much. Although he was actually the most, one of the more kind reviewers, right? But I felt like, come on, you're writing for the fucking LA Times, God damn it. Can't you see allusions to other cinema? You don't see the quotations. You don't understand. Do you only look at the latest releases from studios that you're paid to see on junkets? Because it seems like we live in a junket world, right? And it's just so my world is a junkie world, and the world of modern film reviewing is a junket world. So still a lot of junk. There's still a lot of junk out there, though.
Well said. Well, Michael, hey, thank you very much for carrying this conversation with us. We really appreciate your insight into this beautiful film. And hopefully we get to do this again. And I can't wait to see what you come after Confidential Informant.
There's a lot of crazy ideas swirling around in this head, I can tell you. And so long as this movie makes some money at the box office, I guess I live to shoot another day, right? That's basically where it's at. But thank you so much. I enjoyed talking to you.
Hey, most excellent. Thank you. Next time.